evening, everyone. I'm your host, comedian, magician, Danny Whitson. But it's all tricks aside, because tonight we're turning the paranormal into the normal. Join me as we explore the gray areas of reality. We're going to talk all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, and aliens, and see how it's all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association, and we are live. So if you're an experiencer yourself, or you're just plain nosy, be sure to send me your question and subscribe to the podcast. Now, get ready, because it's going to get deep. No, really, we're going to go way out there, because this is Beyond the TinFoil Hat. What's up, my paranormal junkies? Welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, and I'm your host, Danny Whitson. And boy, do we got a show for you tonight. Yes, we do. But first, before we get started, we got to talk about 3 new reports that you can go check out by Ryan Stacy about the balloons and satellites that were shot down last year over Canada and I believe Alaska. If you go on over to the Paranormal and UFO Facebook page, Ryan Stacy's UFO Paranormal Facebook page, you can check those out. He's got 3 new article reports out there for you to read and let you be the judge. You know, he's got the evidence. He's put it out there. You check it out and, you know, kind of form your own opinion. What do you think's really going on? Was it really weather? Was it balloons? Was it satellites? Who knows? Be sure to get over and check it out. But with that being said, I'm so excited with tonight's guest. Very interesting guy. I couldn't wait to talk to this guy. I've been excited. Tonight's guest, he is a founder of the Neurosurgery Department and Residency Program of the Carilion Clinic in Virginia Tech of the Carilion School of Medicine. His debut novel, Des Pale Flag. So if I don't jack this up anymore, it's a gripping medical and psychological thriller. All right. Let's get a warm welcome for Gary Simonds.
Well, thanks, Danny. Thanks so much for having me. And my album's coming out soon.
There we go.
My favorite bagpipe tunes.
That's awesome. Well, I tell you what, I was like, I don't want to jack this up too bad, but it's debut novel, not album. But I tell you what, Gary, you know, like I said, I've been excited to talk to you. I'm so glad you're here tonight. But I tell you what, if you don't mind, will you go ahead and let the viewers, know a little more about you?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm by training a neurosurgeon, meaning a brain surgeon type thing. And that goes way back now. I trained and practiced for a while in the Army at Walter Reed, and then, went to a couple places, but eventually ended up at, we like to call it Carilion Clinic in Roanoke, Virginia, which now is the Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine. And I started a neurosurgery program there and a residency training program and all. And spent a lot of blood, sweat, toil, and tears there. I did put down the scalpel a few years ago for some, actually, ironically, some neurological reasons. I've done lots and lots of surgery, probably maybe twice as much as kind of the average neurosurgeon through the years. But in the last 10 to 15 years, I got really interested in the subject of burnout in people in healthcare and did a lot of work on that, wrote a few books on that. And then, as you said, I kind of just dipped my toes into the nonfiction, to the fiction world after all that nonfiction with my novel.
So much. Okay. So many questions here. Now, first of all, you did mention burnout. You mean like, so you're talking, burnouts in the medical field, or, when you mean burnout, like tired of it, moving on, is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's a syndrome that's more or less relatively well defined that involves emotional exhaustion, a loss of empathy, and a sense of, you can call it nihilism, like nothing I'm doing is moving the needle. And it can be pretty paralyzing, where, it's just hard to get up and do even your daily routines, as opposed to going above and beyond the call of duty, if you will. And it's felt, first of all, it's felt to be ubiquitous throughout the society. And in this kind of modern age, it's no shock there with everybody going a mile a minute and all. But in medicine, it's estimated that as many as 50% of physicians are at some stage of burnout, where they're not getting joy out of their work. They're not fully engaged. They're exhausted. They are not happy where they are. And that, of course, is going to impact patient care. And it's not just docs. It's basically everybody in medicine, the nurses, the PAs, the therapists, all that, are showing a fair amount of strain.
I think this is, first of all, I totally can relate on the fact of burnout, even as an entertainer. I try to keep things fresh and creative in my mind, or coming up with new material. And sometimes you do get so burned out that I think it's a good thing to take a break, step away, and seeing if anything can happen. Maybe some other reasons to where I may lose faith in humanity, but in audiences. But I totally understand the burnout part. The one thing that's very interesting with you, and one thing like this podcast is a big focus on, is the podcast founder, Ryan Stacy. He's a big fan of I don't know how familiar you are with the consciousness theory of things, and like basically everything, well, they're not really sure what consciousness is, how it really works. You may be a lot more familiar, I would assume, but a lot of things are still a lot of guesses. Am I correct?
Yeah, I would absolutely concur on that. That for all we bluster about, we know everything and we've got it all down and all that, we are not anywhere close to fully understanding what our consciousness is.
And I've heard this thrown around. I have heard this thrown around, but basically, how do you feel about when they say, like, we're kind of just maybe hallucinating reality?
I guess there is a component of that where I would say there is some reality to that, where I think in some ways, if you look at the brain, it's good to look at it as a storyteller. It is not a perfect machine that picks up everything that's going on around us. If you think of, say, birds, they can see ultraviolet light or infrared light or something like that. Anyway, they can see things that we can't. There are things in nature, things in physics, all that that our brains don't pick up on at all, for example. And so it's not a perfect machine. What it is a machine, if you will, that creates a world, creates an environment, creates a universe that we can function in, that makes sense to us, that we can get by and not get killed every day.
And there's in magic, for one. I'm a professional magician, and I always explain to people, I'm like, magic wasn't. First of all, magic was never designed for the video camera. It was designed for the eyewitness, the eyewitness audience. And it's because the way the brain remembers things, as like in a photo shoot, poof, 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 instead of an ongoing stream. And people's like, well, when did he do this or when did he do that? Well, it took place in between the photo, poof, That's where the secret is. So the details that you think that you saw and remember, well, the other stuff you never stood a chance because it takes advantage of the way people think or remember things. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, Danny, it's a really cool concept how these things intersect, because if you really think about, for example, what your eyes are processing, your eyes, light hits the back of your eye, hits the retina. It's got to go through nerves. It actually has got to get all the way to the back of the brain. There, it gets kind of configured, but it's not in the structures that we see. It's a bunch of lines basically, and then other areas of the brain take that information and interpret it and create what we perceive as what we're seeing and the colors we're seeing and all that sort of thing. But if you kind of think of it, there's a delay in there, and it may be milliseconds, but there's a delay in there from when it hits your retina. So what actually happens is your brain is predicting what it's going to see from what information it's received a few milliseconds before. So it makes a lot of sense that you could trick it.
Absolutely. And see, that to me, that just blows my mind altogether, the way, because it's almost like it's almost impossible for us to really truly experience what real reality is. Would you agree?
At least at that millisecond.
Absolutely.
There's a time delay.
Well, even on the physics side of things, like they say, we never actually really touch anything. It's the electrons that
sure.
You see what I mean? When you break it down to that level. And I've always said this. Now, this is going down geek land, but Gary, you're a geek too, brother. We're both
of course.
This is something that I love to think about. And I'm not high. I'm dead sober when I'm thinking this. I think we build our reality based off the tools that we are able to measure it by, our senses, our eyes, the light, our ears, the sound, touch, taste. Okay. Those are the tools that we have, but we don't have every tool to measure everything.
Correct.
So we only know based off the tools we have. There may be other things around us, other realities that we have no clue that exist because we can't measure it. We don't have a way to experience it. Now, and that just, that's where, I keep my mind open. I keep my mind open to other, realms of possibilities. Like I know you've heard of Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's been the big spokesperson that comes up, and I love Neil. I think he talks about some really cool stuff. I can really get into the astrophysics when he talks about planets. I love that. I get a little taken back of his arrogancy, the way he'll shoot anything else down that's not, it's like he's a little narrow-minded on some other things. But let me ask you if you'd agree with this, Gary. I always kind of look at physics like if we woke up in a padded room and we maybe had a very small window that we could look out of, and there was a few tools laying around in this room, but this is all we had. And we had no clue why we were in there. We've never left the room. We can't leave the room. We can only look out this window, and we can only get answers based off the limited tools that are in this room. Now, granted, the best we could ever get is our own guess and a theory what else is out there. So that's the kind of way I see physics. Do you see what I mean? I mean, it's based off our planet, our world, our reality here. But how do we know, really? I always say at the end of the day, we don't know shit.
Yeah, well, I think I very much can resonate with that. I definitely come from the scientific world. I am, embedded in neuroscience. I teach neuroscience. But I like the term that you used before. There's an arrogance. There's a real arrogance. There's a hubris to my world, the science world, where we're just so quick to denigrate anything that doesn't, immediately add up. And there's some reason for it in that we want to stay as objective as possible, and so we want some proof. But but we are, we are very limited. Our brains are not all seeing. They're not, they can't handle everything that's ever existed or every piece of information. In fact, we've got a lot of problems with our processing. It's very easy to influence it. Anyway, it's an imperfect machine. So you kind of think, I often think about, well, if we're using this imperfect machine to try to understand everything, it's almost bound to be an imperfect understanding to begin with, because we can't even imagine some of the tools that we might need or might be able to use. And then even if we could be revealed the truth of everything, could these brains handle it? Are they going to be able to understand it?
I mean, I've thought about that too. I'm like, well, a dog, can you teach a dog French? Probably not, I mean, so I've thought of that we can't even comprehend it. And I'm the same way, in the background, magicians don't believe in anything fun. And it's all Houdini, that damn Houdini's fault, exposing mediums on his whole thing. And now we can't believe in anything fun either. But no, I kind of try to think for myself. I keep an open mind, but I'm also I respect science. I love it. It's all we have. So we do have to, we do have to respect it, Let's get into this because, we talked about consciousness and stuff. And you said that your family is from Scotland. There we go, which I think that's very awesome. And there's some superstition there, some paranormal, more normal beliefs there. Maybe you carry any of that there with you?
Yeah, I mean and maybe the British wouldn't be too happy with me, categorizing them. But my own experience is they are definitely more open to believing in things that are beyond, the immediately obvious. And so I grew up, my mom and my grandma lived in the same house, and they both were absolute believers in the paranormal. Both had multiple experiences with ghosts, or they believed they did. And so I was kind of surrounded by it at growing up. And so, of course, I read every ghost book there ever was, when I was a kid. And so I guess it's less of a shocker to me when I interact with people who believe in it.
I used to not. Okay, I had two major paranormal experiences in my life, and one when I was a child. But later on in life, I didn't believe because I was full flown. I didn't believe in that stuff. I could fake it. I know how people are easily deceived and how, and then a little later on, the loss of my parents passing away, and I had some experiences that was really kind of hard to explain, with the passing of them. And then I had one that an experience just a few years ago, which scared the hell out of me actually, and I was grabbed by something, and I really tried to make sense of this, and to me, I think this is the most frightening and frustrating experience ever because it's different than seeing something. You can kind of explain what you witnessed or what you heard, but when you're physically touched, and I'll be honest with you, Gary, anytime that I would watch these paranormal shows or I would hear people, I was scratched down my back, I would look at my wife and be like, yeah, this person's full of caca. That ain't happening. But I was literally, I have just finished a run. I went on a run and I was on my cool down walk. And I was walking, I had my headphones in and I'm just cooling down. And out of nowhere, I felt something grab my waist and yank me off the trail. So I went off the trail. So my first instinct was, who the hell ran into me? Was somebody on their bike? Was it another jogger? And I look around and there's nothing. No one around. I don't know. you know, but I do know it scared the hell out of me. I called my wife. I was like, come pick me up right here, right here. The place where I did go run, it was by a lake, and I don't know why we tend to do this, but a lot of suicides, a lot of things have happened in this area. I don't know if it's a ghost, what it was, but I experienced it. Now, you know, if you want to look at it, I guess I even tried to do some. Was there, like, you've heard of the thing like the hypnotic jerk, you know, before you go to sleep or something? Did I have some type of crazy nerve twitch or something? But the more and more I thought about it, I was like, no, I literally felt something yank. It was a yank, like a jerk me off the path. So I don't know, man. I don't know. And I don't know if it's a ghost.
Yeah,
who knows?
I always say I'd love it if I encountered a ghost, just because, you know, all sorts of implications about that, and you know, I think it'd be kind of cool. In the book, actually, I kind of explore a little, though, what the ramifications, if you truly unequivocally experience something like a ghost, think of the profound implications of that. It really has religious implications if you think about it, because it's telling you that there's something beyond this. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, I invite the ghost to come meet me. The only other thing I'd say about it, Danny, is so I categorize myself. I used to twist my head in knots trying to figure this out in religion, and, you know, is there something after death and all that sort of thing. And I eventually just threw up my hands and I said, you know, I'm never going to figure it out. I am not going to be in the camp of dismissing everything because they don't know. And I'm not going to be in the camp of, oh, you know, I believe everything that, you know, that people are reporting, because I do know that we can fool ourselves pretty darn easily. Absolutely. So somebody, it's not my own term, but I like the term, and that is, I consider myself an optimistic agnostic, meaning I'd be delighted. And I kind of hope, and I kind of believe there'll be something out there, but who knows?
You know, the interesting, because I was, like I said, I'm still a skeptic on a lot of stuff, you know, because I see a lot of video footage and I'm like, come on, I know how to do that. I could dupe that, and I could do it better than you, actually, you know. And I never was a believer on the whole grabbed and scratch thing, and until it happened to me. And, you know, I don't tell a lot of people, because it's one of those things, like, I can't convince you. You would just have to experience this to how real this was. I don't know what it was, but it was something, and I felt it. But I've always asked that question too, Gary. Like, I've had I had a paranormal investigator on a few episodes back. And one of the first things I asked her, I was like, you know, how come you don't see a lot of these paranormal investigators asking the question that we all want to know? Is there a God? I mean, if you're on the other side, I want to know what's it like over there? What's going on? You know?
Exactly.
But now, one thing she did tell me that I found very interesting, because she said she did ask that question. And she said that because she would do the EVPs, and they have these devices. And she said it seemed like there was a rule they couldn't say. They couldn't tell you everything. I don't know. I don't know, but I'm with you. There's things like, you know, I do wish that, you know, I could experience more to get more answers too. You know, I think that just the interesting side of it.
Well, I mean, even knowing there's something on the other side would probably be, you know, pretty comforting at some level. Hopefully, if it's somewhat pleasant, but you know, you have to realize that your experience, all these experiences that people report, the neuroscience world would certainly say, oh no, I mean, you can create that. You can create anything in your mind. You know, all you have to do is think about some of your dreams and think about how realistic some of your dreams might be. And I've been grabbed in my dreams, and I've been, you know, punched in my dreams, and I've been chased in my dreams, and all that sort of thing. So your brain is perfectly able to create basically anything, you know, any sort of experience.
Which this goes back to an interesting question. Okay. like if your brain is creating these things, and also if your brain is also creating this reality right here that's happening right now, then who's to say that that's not reality? Do you get what I'm going there? Like, I always found it interesting. I mean, this is getting out here. This is a little bit in the paranormal world. We're going to get out here in fantasy land a little bit. But, when people have alien abductions, that they report, alien abductions, and a lot of times it happens at night while they're sleeping. And, people say, well, it's just sleep paralysis that you're experiencing. Well, most of these people, it's either aliens or a demon sitting on their chest, but it is a nightmare that they're having. The thing that I always find interesting about this, yes, sleep paralysis is a very real thing.
Yeah.
But it's also interesting that everyone reports the same similar experience with their sleep paralysis. So, I mean, do you think it's possible? I mean, I think this is outside of science, okay? This is in the comic book realm. But do you think it's possible that at the same time, even though sleep paralysis is what is happening to the body and the mind, but maybe something consciousness, there's something linked to the alien abduction and or the demon on the chest thing. Maybe there's another part of reality going on there that we don't know about. And when I say neurality, I'm not talking about this physical touchy world. That's where the sleep paralysis is taking place. I'm talking about somewhere else, almost like a DMT psychedelic trip kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, again, the neuroscience world would say we can explain this. We can look at brain waves and all that sort of thing, and recognize that there are there may be delays and various communications within the brain, and then all of a sudden you're pulling up either memories or fears or something, and all of a sudden you have this scenario. And as you say, it's very stereotyped, meaning it does seem to be very similar from person to person. One of my sons used to have sleep paralysis, but and the so neuroscience would say, aha, that's even more evidence that it's clearly some part of the brain that's conjuring this up. If it was real, you would think there'd be multiple different types of scenarios. I don't know, but it's interesting because it's almost like it's almost like we're so quick to cancel out everything, not keep an open mind, which is really the antithesis of science in some ways. Science, you're supposed to have a tremendously open mind and be willing to, think about anything and then try to sift through it and see if there's any weight to it or not. But so an example I would give, which I found really kind of almost comical, it was a few months ago. I don't know if you saw it in the news, but there were reports of several people who died where they had EEGs running at the time. And on the EEGs, they saw this burst of activity just before, or after they died, but before they went brain dead. And this real burst of activity, which when they analyzed, they said, this is really similar to your brain when it's very active and experiencing things. So all of a sudden, everybody's conclusion was, oh, we now explained near-death experiences. It's done. We've got it categorized because we know that there's these bursts of electrical activity in your brain. And therefore, this idea of, this long white corridor and your family up there beckoning you to come join them, it has nothing to do with that. It's all brain activity. And I'm sitting there reading this and I'm going, you are making just as big a leap of logic as somebody who thinks they've been abducted. I mean, all we know is there's some electrical activity. It shouldn't be a shock, actually.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. When I see things like, well, really, you're kind of taking a leap of faith too, on that topic. So, well, let's do this. Like I said, we had mentioned earlier that your family, believes in the paranormal, and you do have this fantastic book. I tell you what, Chris, if we could pull it up real quick, the Death's Pale Flag. Okay.
I recognize that.
There we go. We got it right here, and it's not blocking your face, Gary.
That's great. I'll go that one.
Let me see if I'm doing this. There we go, right here. This book. So this book right here. What was the? Let's see. What was the motivator for writing this? What for somebody with a background with you that's that had to get this book written? And if you don't mind, maybe just tell us just a little bit. Don't spoil anything for us, but maybe tell us just a little bit about the book.
Well, I mean, I greatly appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about it a little. I hope I won't go on for too long. But originally through the years, my world is a crazy world. Lots of life. You want to talk about death and all that. There's lots of life and death, lots of high end stuff. And I always thought, boy, I have to imagine some people would want to kind of know what's going on behind the walls, behind the swinging OR doors, and what it's really like, what modern medicine, modern neurosurgery, brain surgery is like. And so I had always written down a few vignettes and stuff like that, and I started writing. In fact, I had quite a bit written where it was nonfiction, just like my burnout books. And I was going, God, this is boring. It was boring, to read, and it was boring to write. It just felt like it was a book report. And so I said, I wonder if I put this into fiction, whether it might grab people more. I always say, put them at the head of the operating table with blood pouring out of somebody's brain, and you got to figure out what the heck to do. And so I came up with a few kind of fiction lines. Originally, it was totally different and may have become a bestseller considering our politics right now. But originally, it was going to be a neurosurgeon at Walter Reed, and Walter Reed takes in politicians and Supreme Court justices and stuff. Well, somebody was bumping them off by causing them to have aneurysms, and there was a beautiful FBI agent. I had quite a bit written, and then I said, this sucks. So that got canned. And finally, I guess I think probably, my childhood and all those experiences started to make sense to me as maybe a storyline, because just around death so very much. And I started, even in the book, we talk about it where it's almost like there's a bridge between life and death. If you're a neurosurgeon, particularly at, one of these big medical centers, you're watching people cross that bridge nonstop, many times a day. And you're trying to pull a few back, but you're kind of right there on that transition, in that transition zone. And it started getting the wheels turning that, okay, if there were such things as ghosts and they somehow were trying to get over the bridge in the other direction, maybe the first person they'd run into is a neurosurgeon, because the guy is there all the freaking time. That's how the idea came about. So the overall concept is that it's a brain surgeon who's probably burning out. That theme gets in there. Overworked, probably a workaholic, who starts seeing things that he shouldn't be seeing. And being a scientist, a neuroscientist, he immediately assumes they're hallucinations and tries to get that figured out. But the more he encounters these things, the more he starts to convince himself that they're ghosts. And, they begin scaring him. He starts acting different. And this puts strain on his marriage and on his job. And that's where it goes from there.
All right. So that sounds awesome. I got to read this. Definitely have to read this. Well, definitely before we get out of here, we will talk more about that and give you a chance to talk more about that at the end of the show. But I did want to crack into that just because it's so interesting to me. And, it seems like there's not a lot of books out there like that. So it's kind of got like its own little niche there.
Yeah, I appreciate you allowing me to talk about it. And there is, I would warn people, there's a lot of neurosurgery. It's gory, and there's a lot of ghosts. And people have told me that they really enjoyed the ghost parts. So I think it's kind of fun.
Well, first of all, the whole brain surgeon thing, that's, to me, it's one of the most interesting parts of any, of medicine, and that's what. So yeah, and brains and ghosts. I mean, what more do you want? Let Let me ask you this, because you touched on this a little bit, and this is I've actually had the pleasure. I've got to interview one person who was a near-death experience, but this is also a topic that's coming up quite a bit. It's getting more and more popular, and once again, that's also something very similar when we were talking about, like with the sleep paralysis and alien abductions and the demons and stuff. When people tend to have these near-death experiences, they all tend to have a similar story. Why do you think that is?
Well, one answer is that's the way it is. So we'll all get on that escalator and hopefully get on the escalator, not going down. What a neuroscientist would say, for example, that paranormal experiences, if we're talking purely from a neuroscientific angle, meaning they're not real, they're being generated by your brain, but they tend to be contagious. And people have studied this, have seen this. If somebody starts talking about an experience, other people will kind of latch onto that experience, and their next experience may very much mimic it. So, I could easily see people just explaining that away. Yeah, everybody's heard it. It's been in the movies. So of course that's what they're going to say they experience, or what they believe they're going to experience. And we know this. There's a real interesting angle to this in memory, in our understanding of memory. And that is that memory is in no way perfectly representative of what happened.
Oh, no way at all.
No, it gets in there. It gets into an area called your hippocampus. It starts getting shipped out to various parts of your brain, and it tends to get shipped out to the parts of the brain that are in charge of whatever that sensation or experience is. So if you're hearing a voice, it's going to go to your speech centers. If you're going to feel the cold wind against your face, it's going to go to a sensory center. If you're looking at a blue sky in your memory, it's going to go, to your visual areas, your visual interpretation areas. So it gets shipped out in multiple pieces. And then when you go to recall it, when you pull these things back, it's got to put it back together. It often doesn't have everything. It may have lost some of the traces. And so what the brain does, and I think it's fascinating, is it doesn't say, hey, I forget that piece. It makes it up. It will, boom. You don't actually remember what the weather was like, but all of a sudden it's a blue sky. And, you can kind of test this sometimes with some of your memories, like, with a brother or, some sibling or an old friend. And you say, hey, you remember that time, I scored the winning touchdown against so-and-so. It was cold and raining. And they say, no, it wasn't. It was a beautiful day. And you didn't score it. I did.
Yeah. Oh, I know that way too much. Let me do this real quick. We do got a question from Logan Thompson. Logan, we will cover the book more before we get out of here, but Logan wants to know, where can the book be found?
Thanks, Logan, by the way, for asking, but it's everywhere where you can get it online. So it's, at all the typical Amazons and Barnes and Noble and all sorts of book outlets. And also, I always try to put in a plug for independent booksellers, and they have kind of a consortium that you can buy books from too. So if you just kind of look up independent booksellers, that's another way to get it. But it's out there. It's also an audiobook, and I think the guy who read it, I really like how the guy who read it did it, and it's an ebook, all that stuff.
I love audiobooks.
Yeah, me too.
My new thing. Back to what you said, the brain does make things up. Absolutely it does. But that being said, we all got brains, at least most of us. So how do we know? That's where it comes back to the whole, can we really know what is really going on? Can we really know the real reality of things? Because we all kind of got the basic model up here that whenever it can't make sense of something, it does filler. Here's an interesting story I'll share real quick with you, and I'm sure you've heard stories like this before, Gary. But I'll never forget when my grandmother passed away. Okay, all the family was in the hospital room, And, like I mentioned earlier, we don't have grandmothers in Tennessee, y'all. They're called mammaws. All right. Well, my mammaw, she had a very young, a little brother who died at a very young age, was hit by a drunk driver on his way to Sunday school. Very sad story, died as a child. Well, on my mammaw's deathbed, everything is fine. We're gathered around the bed, and then she looks over in the corner of the room. And she says, Vincent, there's Vincent. He's here to see me. And then she passed. I mean, the hairs on the back of your neck stood up.
Yeah, it worked on me.
We looked over in the corner. We didn't see anything, but she saw Vincent. And to think that memory, that image would happen at that moment, at that precise time, to whenever she was in the middle of passing, it's just... I mean, is it the brain's way of making passing easier, or is there something more to it?
Yeah, and how are we going to know?
Exactly.
And the thing about it, it's very similar to religion and God and that sort of thing. It's almost impossible to prove that such things don't exist. I mean, how do you do that? You can't. And again, I just keep recycling back to the fact that we're very imperfect machinery. What we're using is very imperfect. It's wonderful. It's amazing. It's a miracle, all that sort of thing. But it ain't perfect. And it makes all sorts of errors and doesn't see everything. And it is kind of funny, too, when I hear, often people on the scientific side shooting down religion as well. And then I read this, I don't know why, but I read some article by these theoretical astrophysicists. They spent all day theorizing things. And they were saying, well, it's totally possible that there are many, many, many infinite number of universes. And each universe only differs from the last one by one subatomic particle. But because it's infinite, you get everything. And I'm sitting here going, wait, how is that any different from believing in a God, or at least giving,
Exactly. You're taking another leap.
Yeah. So.
Well, I always tell people, it's like physicists they come up with the best guess until they get a better guess.
Yeah. And that's the idea of science.
Yeah.
Right. It is, you should be, I agree. It is educated guessing, which you try to actually, the real scientific method is you try to shoot down the alternative hypotheses. And if that doesn't work, well, that gives more weight to your hypothesis. But that doesn't prove it. It just brings it closer. And it brings it closer to our reality as we know it. Again, you get into circular logic if you think about it.
Yes, I totally agree. Well, I tell you what, Gary, this is what we're going to do. First, we're going to cut to a commercial break. We're going to get these messages out. When we get back, I want to talk to you more about the book, and let's continue this awesome discussion, man. This has been great. Guys, stay tuned. We'll be right back after these messages with Gary Simonds.
Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today.
Business. It's your property. Your assets are worth protecting. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services specializes in patrolling and inspecting residential or commercial property against fire, theft, vandalism, terrorism, and illegal activity. People and buildings are monitored to prevent crime. Keep your property, your people, and your assets safe from threat. Our elite staff are dual licensed private investigators and security guards. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services. Go to blacklightiss.com.
All right, welcome back. And if you're just now tuning in, we are here with Gary Simonds. He's an author of Death's Pale Flag. We've been, like I said, if you're just getting in here, we have talked about some very interesting stuff, and we got some more interesting things to come. Guys, viewers, if you want to send your questions in, you got any questions for Gary, get them in here. We'll get them on the screen, and we'll get them to him as fast as we can. All right, Gary. So like I said, we mentioned on the near-death experiences. They're out there. It's one of those things that continuously happen. Maybe it is a copycat thing because human beings, we do that. We have a tendency of, I guess it's like a really crazy form of groupthink, I guess you would call it, you know. But then on the flip side of it, that doesn't necessarily explain it. I don't think that could be a complete explanation for it either, you know. I mean, if someone sees a tree and then Peter comes around the corner and sees that same tree, they both saw a damn tree. You know what I mean? So it doesn't mean the one's making it up, you know. So I think, but I'm sure it does happen. But then again, it also opens up to where maybe something else is going on there too. But let's do this because we did mention on the religious part too. And I'm not a very religious person. I am not, but I do consider myself a spiritual person. Once again, I used to make fun of those people. Now I'm one of them. But as far as the the spiritual, the religious side of it, it almost, wouldn't it be a bummer? I mean, really, when you think about it, a complete bummer if we do just croak and there's no meaning. Like, we've evolved to have this brain that has an amazing imagination, that has the ability to question its own reality. For what? Oh, for nothing.
Kind of a mean trick of the cosmos, right? I think the one solace I think the abject atheists will throw at you, particularly the scientific ones, but they'll just tell you, well, you won't know. It's not,
of course.
It's not like you can sit there and be disappointed.
I mean, I won't be able to come back and say, damn it.
Yeah.
But I used to be an atheist. I was a hardcore atheist, and I had all those arguments down packed anytime everybody ever, challenged me. But then I did get to thinking, I was like, well, what a waste of an imagination. What of a waste of why would we have this if there wasn't something more to it? It's just everything that in existence in our, like this computer, this table, it all began as a thought. That's where it all began. And then it became an actual tangible reality, something we could touch. And I thought, the same thing, why would we want to believe that there was, because we all do. Whether if you really truly agree with it or not, you want there to be something after you croak.
Absolutely.
What I mean?
And, I always say, they say there's no atheists in foxholes. I'll tell you, as a neurosurgeon, there aren't a lot of atheists when somebody's, brain is bleeding and you're there. If you're there, give me a little hand here, for God's sake. But, it's interesting, if you look at some of the analyses of people who believe in paranormal experiences.
Hold on one second. There we go, Gary. You're breaking up on us just for a minute.
I think we froze for half a second there.
There you go.
But the neuropsychologists will tell you that there's a tendency for people in that camp to have a certain type of cognitive approach to the world, and that is that they tend to be intuitive, that they tend to believe their guts as opposed to being more analytic. And they're almost they're denigrating in the way they talk about it, because they say, the people who are analytic have more cognitive flexibility. But then I run into full-blown atheists for which there is no proof that there is no God. So they're working on an intuition. And I'm going, you're just being as intuitive. You're going on your gut feeling just as much as somebody who's believing in religion or the paranormal.
I totally agree with you. I totally agree. And the agnostic approach is probably the most fair approach you can have towards any type of live paranormal, approach. I think that's the most fair. Let me do this. Logan Thompson has another question real quick for you. What was the drive for your profession?
And I'm assuming maybe he means, what made me choose it? And the drive, there's actually two answers there, because it could be what drives you to keep at it. And I would tell you the thing that is more profound, and that gets into the book actually, but you want to talk about something quasi paranormal or religious, or I don't know what, but I dealt with the worst things day in, day out, breaking awful news to people right and left. You could go one night and tell half a dozen families that their loved one is dead, loved one is paralyzed, loved one has a horrible brain tumor. I mean, just one thing after another after another. And it never ceased to stun me how amazingly brave and just thick with humanity. And the other term that I have to use is just, it seemed like they were full of grace, these families and patients would be. It just never ceased to stun me. It still sends chills down my back just thinking about how amazing they were. They weren't running around screaming. They weren't throwing chairs, which is what I'd be doing. They were just, there was a calmness that would come over them and full of whatever you want to call it. I call it kind of a grace. So that makes it easy to get out of bed every day because you're there. I may not be able to help all the patients, but I can certainly try to help, their families and try to do as good a job as possible. So that drove the day to day. What got me into neurosurgery, I wasn't going to be a neurosurgeon. I went through multiple connotations in med school, but eventually was going to be a heart surgeon. And had that all lined up. In my last month in medical school, I saw my first brain operation. I just went, oh my God, I have got to do that. So talk about intuition or gut feeling. I just made the leap based on nothing other than, man, is that operation cool? And I have got to do it. It was stupid as hell because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I was getting myself into a lot. It's a long, hard slog, but I never looked back.
I couldn't imagine, not to get too sad here, but I remember when my son was very young, his appendix ruptured, and we spent some time in Children's Hospital, which is one of the best places in the world and one of the worst places in the world because of what you have to see. There are children there that are not going home. Mm-hmm. And it blew my mind. I believe our doctor, she was fantastic. But she was also, you could almost robotic. Mm-hmm. And, leaving there, I thought that's probably the only way she has probably had to become that way based around what is she around and seeing so much through, her career. That is that something, how do they prepare you for stuff like that? Like you said, you have to go tell families that their loved ones didn't make it,
Yeah. And, I might even argue that doc was showing signs of burnout, just that the emotional exhaustion, the losing kind of some of that empathy. It's kind of classic symptomatology in some ways, but on the other hand, you can't fall apart each time you go talk to a family or each time you're in the middle of an operation. You got to kind of saddle up and get to the next thing. So you do at some point, to some degree, you throw up a bunch of barriers, right, to your emotional self. And there's no two ways about that. Do they prepare you? No, at least not in those days. There was not much preparing. There was a lot of sink or swim. You get thrown in the deep end and go take care of this, and that's what you would do. I think we're a little bit more enlightened nowadays. I think we spend a lot more time trying to prepare our med students. And certainly in my residencies where we train people after they graduated from med school, and in neurosurgery, it's 7 years. Back in my day, it was 7 years of 110 hours a week in the hospital. Now it's 80. But we spent a lot of time working with the residents, even doing role playing and stuff to get them practicing. How do you talk to people and how do you absorb it? And then we spent a lot of time on burnout and, trying to, what our way of combating burnout is to build our resilience, our ability to come through hard stuff, not to be broken down by it.
Wow. I mean, I can only imagine, what that would take, though. It's just it's one of those. I'm glad we got them, but I'm also on the same time, no, I couldn't do that gig. I mean, that's just that would be a very tough thing to do.
I think, by the way, Danny, anybody can do it. It's just. It's a matter of climatization. You're in a business that is infested with a lot of sharks and a lot of disappointment and stuff. And you know how to do it. Somebody else may look at that and go, "Oh my God, I'm not going to face an audience like that."